Hello, I'm Irene Sare and I'm glad to see you at this meeting. If you find difficulty in crochet gauge meaning, first you have to watch another my video. The necessary link is at the top of your screen right now and in the description box under this video. The only way to measure a crochet gauge is to make a gauge swatch. It is a small sample of the used pattern that you make before starting the crochet project. It takes some time to crochet a gauge swatch to prepare it for measuring and analysis. But it helps not only to measure a crochet gauge, but also gives the answer to the question: are the chosen yarn and hook size in combination with your individual crochet gauge are suitable for a particular project? This is useful when you take another yarn the pattern recommends. There is a certain amount of risk that you will be disappointed in the finished crochet item produced from a particular yarn by a particular hook size. In this case, you would have a following choice: to accept such a result and use an unpleasant product, or to spend more time crochet the project again using another yarn or another hook size. So don't miss a step of a gauge swatch making, even if your crochet desire to start your crochet project is very strong and you want to get finished product as quickly as possible. The crochet gauge swatch is very important and necessary for any crochet beginner. But still there are two situations when you can refuse to crochet a gauge swatch. First situation takes place when you have already crocheted this particular type of product using this particular yarn. You know all characteristics of finished product after washing and using. You just crochet a repeat now. Second situation takes place when you have a big crochet experience. You have tried different yarns and easily can choose hook size for your usual crochet gauge. Let's talk in more detail about how to crochet a gauge swatch. Before you start to crochet a gauge swatch, you should choose the pattern, yarn and hook. After all necessary things are ready, it's time to make a crochet gauge swatch directly. If your product is a crochet stuffed toy amigurumi, you have to make one small detail of it. Crochet one leg or one hand of this toy. You may crochet only a part of one amigurumi's detail. The size of this item should be enough large to rate the quality of the crochet fabric, but don't make the whole toy completely. Put a polyester fiber fill inside this detail according to your stuffing technology. Put as much polyester fiber fill as needed to achieve the desired tightness level of the toy. Someone likes tightly stuffed toys. Someone likes softer sensations. Pay attention to the stretching degree of the toy's crochet fabric. Look and explore. Is there a lot of space between the yarn strands through which the filler is visible? Some of us don't like to see any filler through the yarn strands. Some of us don't pay any attention to it. Seam the end of fabric by sewing with needle or by crocheting them together with a hook. In this way you seal the top of this detail. If your project is clothes for human or amigurumi toy, blanket or pillowcase, crochet up a square sample swatch. Chain enough stitches for the side of your swatch across, and then crochet enough rows to make a square. If you have a question how big should a gauge swatch be, I will answer following. The size of this square should be larger than the size of gauge swatch indicated in the pattern. For example, your pattern recommends to have some number of stitches and rows in 4-inch square swatch or 10 cm square swatch. In this case, you should crochet a 6-inch square swatch or 15 cm square swatch. Such reserve is necessary for two reasons. First, the size of crochet fabric may decrease after washing, but you need at least 4-inch square swatch for measuring. Second reason is that you should measure gauge swatch in the middle of the fabric. It is not right to work on the edges. No matter what kind of crochet project you make, it is important to write down the number of rows and stitches while crocheting. Note down the yarn name and hook size you have used in the gauge swatch making. Try to remember your fittings you have had during crochet process. If different stitch patterns are characterized in different gauges, you should crochet a swatch for each stitch pattern. If separate parts of the project requires different hook sizes, make gauge swatches for each part. It is interesting for me what crochet project you will make a gauge swatch for. Leave your answer in comment box under this video. When your crochet gauge swatch is finished, measure and write down the exact dimensions of it: length, width, diameter. The next important step is to wash the finished gauge swatch according to the cleaning rules indicated on the yarn label. You should wash the gauge swatch like a finished main item. If you don't use a washing machine, put the gauge swatch in cold or lukewarm water for at least 10 minutes. You may use a delicate soap. Pour out most of the water and gently squeeze out excess water. Look at the water at this moment and answer the question: does the water have the same color the used yarn has? If does, you should know that items produced by this yarn can dye another items while washing. Don't twist or stretch the fabric because wet fibers are very fragile. You can wrap a crochet swatch in a towel to remove excess moisture. Then lay your gauge swatch flat and pin it gently in a correct shape. The swatch has to dry completely before you remove the pins. When the gauge swatch is completely dry, it's time to analyze it. Touch the crochet gauge swatch and answer the question: have the yarn texture characteristics changed? The yarn may become softer after washing. If your project is amigurumi stuffed toy, pay attention to the polyester fiber fill that is inside amigurumi's detail. Its size may decrease after washing, making the amigurumi's body too floppy to hold their shape. In this case, you should put more fiber fill into amigurumi's body when you will make the whole toy. Look at the crochet gauge swatch and answer the question: have the yarn color changed? The yarn may become faded after washing. Measure the crochet gauge swatch attentively and compare these dimensions with those you have got before washing. The size of a swatch may increase or decrease after washing. Such analysis is necessary to familiarize oneself with characteristics of a particular yarn. But our another goal is to measure crochet gauge with the help of prepared gauge swatch. If your project is clothes for human or amigurumi toy, blanket or pillowcase, put the crochet gauge swatch on a flat, hard surface with good lighting. Be ready to walk in the middle of the swatch, stepping back from the edges. First, you have to measure gauge horizontally. Measure 4 inches or 10 centimeters in the row using a ruler or tape measure. If your pattern has another size of gauge square swatch, measure the line segment in size the pattern gauge gives. Place pins at the ends of this measured segment and count the number of interior stitches in a row between two pins. It is important to count half stitches too. Then you have to measure gauge vertically. Set the ruler or tape measure perpendicular to the rows and measure 4 inches or 10 centimeters in the middle of the fabric. Place pins at the ends of this measured segment and count the number of interior rows between two pins. It is important to count half rows too. After this, you have to compare the number of stitches and rows with the number your pattern gauge gives. Remember that matching the stitch width is much more important than matching the row height. If these numbers are equal or not very different, your crochet gauge in combination with your yarn and hook size is the same crochet gauge indicated in the pattern. Sometimes the gauge is given in pattern repeats. In this case, you should calculate the pattern repeats between two pins. The patterns of amigurumi's toys don't give such information about crochet gauge. It gives only a height of finished toy. In addition to the analysis done earlier, you have an opportunity to analyze the proportions between amigurumi's details. Look at the photo of finished toy and calculate the size of one separate detail using the information about finished toy's height. Compare this size with the size of the gauge swatch you have made. You should understand that tight fabric of the amigurumi's body without visible space between the yarn strands is more important than the toy's size. Be careful if your yarn has another weight or fiber content the crochet instruction recommends, the size of your finished item will be not the same the instruction gives. In this case, the number of rows, stitches, pattern repeats will differ from the gauge indicated in crochet instruction, or the size of your amigurumi's detail will be another. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next video.